On behalf of my team in the Office of Technology Transfer, we want to welcome you to our annual awards event. This is a special evening because it's the 10th time we've done this. And so we tried to change up the program just a little bit for you. And like in prior years, in the year 2015, our faculty, our students, our staff were incredibly active, and we had some really interesting invention disclosures that came into the office, and so we appreciate your showing up here this evening to help acknowledge their achievements. It's been a long award season. We started in January with the Golden Globe Awards, and then very quickly thereafter we had the Georgia Bio Awards, and then in February it was the Grammy Awards and the Oscars. And now we're going to close out the award season with the annual award, or the annual celebration of technology and innovation. In all seriousness, we are very proud of our inventors and creators. So often in tech transfer we get caught up reporting all kinds of metrics. How many inventions disclosures do we have? How many patents did we file? How many have issued? How many licenses did we execute? How many startup companies did we create? But the ultimate validation of a tech transfer program is really new products on the market. And the really cool thing about being in the life sciences space is new products on the market mean that you're saving people's lives and making their lives better. So what we have set out to do over the last couple of years in the office, maybe it's been longer than a couple of years, and it's something we wanted to do for even longer than that, is to try to create some patient-centered videos and just hear from the patient's perspective how some of these products have had an impact on their lives. It's taken a Herculean effort, but we've managed to put 2 videos together, and we want to have a chance to share that with you this evening. I'm going to invite Linda Kesselring, who had the brilliant idea to introduce this into the program this year, to come up and kick it off.
So as Todd said, we have 2 patient-centered videos to share with you tonight. We have the inventors here to share a little of their story with you. I'll tell you the first one that we did was the Emory Cardiac Toolbox, which is a suite of software tools that assist physicians in interpreting cardiac images, and Ernie Garcia is the inventor. And in a little unique twist that probably doesn't happen that often, he had his own tool used in his own diagnosis, and that was recently in an issue of Newsweek. And our second video is transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS for short, which is magnetic pulses to the brain for treatment-resistant depression. And our Emory inventor is Chip Epstein. Our patient was Martha Rhodes, who wrote a book on her experience. And we might as well just get right to it. And we'll show you the first one, and Ernie will come up.
Well, thank you, Linda. I guess I'll introduce myself. You see who I am. I got to start with a funny story. So last December, I was one of the guest speakers at the Latin American Nuclear Medicine Society meeting, about 1,000 people, and I show up at the first social event, the Icebreaker, and some of the people I know came up to me, about 5 of them, of Spanish people, of course, and they start asking me, how are you doing? Now, one of the things after this video is no one ever says to me, how are you doing? They say, how are you doing? So they told me that in Spanish, and I said, I'm doing fine, And then they start getting very specific about my issues, and so I say to them, you're getting, how do you know all these details? They tell me, oh, because they're playing a video of you in the exhibit hall. So I go into the exhibit hall, 1,000 people, they're playing this video with Spanish subtitles. So I started thinking, I wonder what I said, so it's always interesting. So thank you for the opportunity of being able to talk to you. This video is really, the reason that I like the idea is because it kind of tells you about my life, meaning that I like to turn things that are negative into things that are positive. In the video, what's negative, of course, is that I had a heart attack and that I do have heart disease and had quadruple bypass. The positive is that to let other people know that even though you think you're an expert in the heart and you have no reasons to have heart disease, you can have heart disease, and that you should plan accordingly. And we could get into that maybe later while we're exchanging social niceties. So in my own career, I started out in graduate school as an astrophysicist, and this is 1971. That sounds like a positive, but 71 was the year that NASA took a huge budget cut, and they fired 50% of all the astrophysicists in the world, meaning that if I left college as an astrophysicist, I would have never gotten a job. So looking around, I fell into nuclear medicine, and I was quite happy to find a field that used not only what I have learned as a physicist, but I was also very lucky that because I also needed additional funds, I worked at Florida Power and Light, and at the time, 1971, this is almost before computers were invented. In 1971, it was the power companies that not only had the biggest mainframe computers, but they had a huge talent. And I came across very talented people that at the time, those kind of courses were not being taught in college. So between the two, I came in between nuclear medicine, physics, and I guess the three computers. I came into the realization when I started working in the field that image interpretation, but in reality, all of medicine is quite subjective. And at least for the image interpretation part, I wanted to change the art of image interpretation into the science of image interpretation. And pretty much that was my vision that's gotten me to where I am today. Again, as I said, in 71, there were only mainframe computers. Probably most of you don't even know what a mini computer is. But I was also lucky, you see there's a lot of lucky things in my life, that mini computers were just being introduced into nuclear medicine for imaging and quantification. Now, these computers cost about $100,000 each. I hate to tell you what they look like, or they were huge computers with hardly any memory or any power, and you had to do miracles in programming them in order to get to make anything happen. But because people paid $100,000 for a system, they expected all the software to come in for free, which meant that there weren't many software packages that you could use. So at the time, I made it into a mission to make the field understand that they had to pay for software. And I wrote an editorial, which was, I went around the different companies, I would see my editorial poster on their bulletin board, meaning that they supported the idea that the future is in software and not in hardware. And as you know, this is what's happened, luckily. Now, as a faculty member and an academician, when you start going into this area, you realize, and I realized at the time, that I wanted to take the responsibility on not only to coming up with the ideas, not only getting NIH grants to fund the science, but also make sure that what I developed and my team developed was available for patients. And because those companies at the time were not very knowledgeable in how to do these things, I took on that responsibility of commercializing it. At the time, again, now we're talking about 1981, 1980. This is the time where when an academician would start commercializing stuff, they look at you kind of funny. They look at you suspicious. Everything you say maybe, can't be trusted, and so on. And even when I got to Emory in '85, it was still a time where there's a little bit of embarrassment receiving money from commercial things. I have to give a lot of credit to Todd, who changed the culture, because it's a cultural thing. And as you know, a lot of changes have taken place because government have realized, again, it's not only the science, but you have to translate it to the point that patients can use it. So a lot of these suspicions, even though we still have a very, how can I say, a strong conflict of interest committee, which I deal with, I think navigating those issues are reasonable compared to the rewards. So just want to take a moment to really congratulate all of you who are jumping in this arena of commercializing your ideas. That is very rewarding, and as soon as you see someone benefit from it, you will feel the rewards. And so again, thank you for the opportunity. Congratulations on what everything you have accomplished. I do have to end with a negative note, and the negative note is I read somewhere that about 80% of people that start new companies have heart attacks. So the in memoriam list, I hope it doesn't keep growing too fast. So I hope to see you here next year vertically rather than digitally. Thank you very much.
This program is brought to you by Emory University.
My family history is that I have no heart disease in the family. But for years, I suffer from gastric reflux. And the gastric reflux gives you symptoms very similar to heart attacks. One night, I start having chest pain. So I just say it's reflux, and I'm just going to go to sleep, don't worry about it. And the next day, I wake up and I go about my life, except that my heart rate is higher than usual.
Ernie started having chest discomfort that wasn't really typical of ischemic heart disease. On the EKG, it wasn't really obvious that he had any abnormalities, but he kept on having those symptoms, and eventually the cardiologist decided to order a nuclear cardiology test, and we used the Emory Cardiac Toolbox to diagnose that yes, indeed, he did have ischemic changes. Usually the physician tends to concentrate on the area that's more severe, that's easily recognizable by just visual analysis. And what the Emory Cardiac Toolbox does is helps identify that second area that doesn't seem so obvious, because we're looking at the heart at the molecular level. So it's really remarkable that Ernie developed the Emory Cardiac Toolbox. And a few years ago, Ernie was able to use his own technology to save him from having a heart attack or potentially more harmful complications.
So that was a little strange to know that, to sit there and see the tool that we developed, being able just to see my heart there. And I was at that point very sure of what was going on with me. So the Emory Cardiac Toolbox, there's at least 30,000 licenses all over the world. And to walk into a clinic, you know, in Italy and see that they're using your tool for diagnosing patients, that actually was very rewarding. That feeling is very rewarding. When it was on me, it was more like a trusted friend telling me what's really going on with me.
That guy is kind of a stiff by comparison, isn't he? Anybody here watch Steve Colbert at night? A couple of nights ago, you may have seen another shorter endorsement, surprise from a guest. And was it Colbert or was it Daily Show? Whichever, there was a guest, and he started from nowhere talking about his depression and how this same technology had made an enormous difference. But that's not actually what we set out to do with this. Transcranial magnetic stimulation became possible in the late 80s, and because I like to build things, I went ahead and built one. And it became immediately obvious that it required way too much power. I'm a neurologist. We like to map what different parts of your brain are doing, and this is a great way to do that. We especially like to map which side of your brain is doing the talking. Often because we're planning to cut something out, and we don't want to find out later that we cut the wrong place. But it was immediately clear that to map things like language in your brain, which, by the way, is harmless and fairly painless. I've had it done about a dozen times myself before it seemed like a good idea to quit. It was going to take a whole lot of power. To be precise, every pulse that you heard is about the power of a cardiac defibrillator. And to do useful things, we have to do that 10 times a second for a while. And the power requirement meant that the coils would literally melt. So you had to do something about it to make it practical. So we're going to show you another very short video. This takes place in the front of our house. Outside, you'll see in a second why it is outside. It shows a magnetic stimulation coil with a piece of aluminum sitting on top of it, and I'm going to fire it at about the same power as a single pulse with that particular coil. You start? To do that again, in case you blinked, it'll run one more time. Anyway, we wanted to kick out that much power 10 or 20 times a second. We had to do something. So specifically to try and map language harmlessly in the brain, we were able to get funding from joint Georgia Tech Emory projects. I had a collaborator from Georgia Tech who did the heavy theoretical lifting of actually just putting a simple iron core in a coil of wire. This is slightly smaller than the prototype. And that would sound trivial, but there are actually big technical problems in doing that with sufficient power. But it worked. It made this much easier and more reliable to do for mapping language, which is a tiny application. But about that time, other people were describing using this for depression, and it was immediately obvious that we might be able to make that more practical at about the same time. This Office of Technology Transfer came into existence and started working deals, and now 600 installed magnetic stimulation units later, tens of thousands of people have been treated, and I'm very happy to say that for a lot of them, it's made a big difference in their lives. I'm very grateful that you guys came along at just the right time. I was very lucky with accidental timing. I was lucky that OTT is there. I told Todd earlier that I have some feelings similar to Ernie, and I would like to stage a cage fight one day between OTT and the Conflict of Interest Committee, which appear to be working in counter purposes to each other, but not tonight. Tonight, let's celebrate what you all have done. Thank you.
That was the day that I gave up. That was the day when I cried uncle. That was the turning point for me. That was when I realized, February 2009 is going to be my new life. When I tell you that no one could be more surprised than I was to end up in an emergency room due to a self-inflicted drug overdose, trying to kill myself, I mean, that's an understatement. I was the most surprised. There was no reason in the world for me to want to die. I had everything. And yet, I woke up every morning wishing I was dead. I was officially diagnosed with depression, serious depression, when I was in my late 30s, early 40s. I had a doctor, a psychiatrist, who was prescribing this drug, and then this drug, and then this drug, and I called it the medication merry-go-round. I would try this medication, I'd be on it for the 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it was. I'd go back to him and I'd say, not only do I not feel better, I feel worse. I didn't know that the drug had stopped working. I did not know that I had developed a resistance to it because I had been on it for so long. My sister, Maria, happened to be in a doctor's office going through a local magazine, and there was a full-page ad, treat your depression without medication. It was a miracle. I look at it as a miracle.
We devised a way to use my experience in what kind of electromagnetic coil would be best at actually stimulating focal parts of the brain. And we were able to design this thing right here, which is our very first prototype. This allows transcranial magnetic stimulation with about 1/4 of the power and 1/8 of the heat that was previously required, and is still required for all magnetic stimulators that don't use this particular technology.
And it's that electrical stimulation based on the magnetic pulse that then wakes up the brain. And that, when those neurons start talking to each other because they've been awakened, they start delivering the neurotransmitters that you need to feel happy. I really knew I was feeling better when I caught myself laughing. We were out with some friends and I went, I just laughed. That was huge, considering how low I had been just 6 weeks before.
My life is redefined. It's almost like the reinvention of Martha. And that's a great feeling. That's a great feeling it's like having a second chance to be alive.